Hey, what's up? My name is Theun. I've been asked by a few friends if I could make a Resto Shaman guide for Season 1 of The War Within. So that's what this is going to try and be. I'll try my best to keep it brief, but there's quite a lot to talk about. Um, I'm not going to cover some of the finer details like what trinkets look good or what embellishments you should run, because frankly, that stuff's going to change before Season 1 launches anyway. And also, that's pretty easy to find out looking at whatever guide you want to look at, right? Like Wowhead, Icy Veins, whatever. Instead, I want to really talk about the hero talent trees, when you should use them, and like what types of builds that they play well with, and also talk about the class and spec trees a little bit because Resto Shaman received a bit of a talent tree revamp heading into the War Within, and there's quite a lot to talk about there. My goal kind of is to make the decision making process between what talents you want to play and what hero talents and stuff that you want to play a little bit easier for players that haven't played Shaman in a while or have never played Shaman before. Because unlike most specs, Shaman has a ton of flexibility with both hero talents and their talent trees. So it can be pretty daunting for someone that is pretty new to the spec. I guess before I start talking about hero talents and stuff, why should you play Resto Shaman? Uh, the thing that most people care about is numbers. So numbers look quite good in a raid setting and very good in a Mythic Plus setting. You've probably seen a bunch of tier lists ranking Shaman quite high, and I agree. I think Shaman looks pretty good in both raid and Mythic Plus. It's quite versatile with how you want to build it. So I'll talk more about that when I talk about the talents and stuff, but you have a bunch of different healing profiles if you choose to do so. You have a bunch of great cooldowns, and one of the things that they added in the War Within is our new raid buff, Sky Fury. This gives the entire party or raid Wind Fury and also gives them a small amount of mastery. I'm not going to cover what a mastery point is and how exactly this works, but the point is this is a pretty good raid buff, and it is definitely a reason to bring a shaman to the group, whether that's Elemental, Enhance, or Resto, kind of up to the group that you're with. But Resto Shaman looks quite good heading into the War Within. And I think it's a pretty safe spec to play. The thing that keeps me coming back to Shaman is kind of the utility belt that you have. So you have options for almost every situation that you could ask for in a raid or a Mythic Plus setting. So you have Poison Cleansing Totem, you have Curse Dispel, Tremor Totem, which unfortunately I don't think I had talented this a single time in Dragonflight, but like if there was a Tremorable Fear, then you have it, right? You have multiple AoE stops. You have Wind Shear, which is the best kick in the game. You have Purge. So you have almost everything that you could ever ask for, and using that utility feels really cool. It feels like you're helping out your group a ton. So that's the kind of thing that keeps me coming back. So moving on from that, I guess we'll start with the hero talents. Unlike most specs in the game that have either one option that they'll use for everything, or they'll have like one raid option and one Mythic Plus option, both Farseer and Totemic for Resto Shaman are good in both raid and in Mythic Plus. So super versatile. I think it's like one of the only specs in the game that this is true for, and it also means that it's up to the player to make the choice of like which one should you play. So to hopefully make that a little bit easier, I'm going to cover briefly what each of them do and kind of the builds that they favor. But you should be playing, or you should be, trying out both of them. I personally prefer Totemic a little bit more, but Farseer is like just as good. Feels very effective in a Mythic Plus setting. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. So we'll start with Farseer. The whole name of the game here is you're summoning ancestors that help you deal damage or heal. They sort of mimic your spells in a way that's like kind of similar to a Holy Priest's Divine Image. So if I cast an AoE DPS spell, they will do the same, and if I cast a single target heal, they will also do that. You can like choose to improve your ancestors in different ways, so you can make them last longer and their spells hit harder, or you can opt for RNG ways to summon them instead, with Ancient Fellowship and Routine Communication. There's a couple of guaranteed ways to summon an ancestor. So you can use Ancestral Swiftness. This is just an improved version of Nature Swiftness on a shorter cooldown that also summons an ancestor. Or you can take Unleash Life. using Unleash Life will always summon an ancestor, and this one also lasts longer than all the other ones. Or you can use Undulation. Proccing Undulation will summon an ancestor as well. And then, like I said earlier, you can opt for RNG talents that, while you're pressing Riptide, you can have a chance to summon ancestors. All the talent trees, or all the talents on the Farseer tree are optimal, or like they're all viable, except for the defensive node. I would only ever choose Earthen Communion. Everything else is perfectly viable though, so whichever one you want to opt for here, perfectly fine to do so. The gameplay of Farseer is really revolved around pressing Riptide often, and either pressing like Healing Surge or Chain Heal. For now, unfortunately, the Ancestors Chain Heal casts that they do is really favoring targeting like pets. So if you have a hunter in your group or an Unholy DK, unfortunately, that healing kind of gets wasted. So for now, at the time of making this video, we're instead just leaning into the single target healing, spot healing niche. So Riptide is fantastic. A lot of stuff interacts with Riptide on the tree, and also you gain like an additional charge with Elemental Reverb. And whenever we're not pressing Riptide, we're instead just pressing Healing Wave or Healing Surge and spot healing for a ton. So that's kind of the gameplay loop of Farseer. You do have to press Healing Rain still, which I'll cover that why that's important in a second. But yeah, really efficient tree. It's kind of hard to run out of mana with Farseer, which is great. It's a nice advantage. But the AoE healing feels a little hard to do at times, especially because of the way that their chain heal casts targets players. Or pets, rather. Okay, moving on to Totemic. So this one changes gameplay a little bit more, but is my personal favorite of the two. So a lot of people gave the feedback that they don't like pressing Healing Rain every 10 seconds. Feels a little cumbersome, doesn't feel like it does enough healing from other spells like Efflorescence and stuff from a druid. So Blizzard said, we hear ya, and instead gave us Surging Totem. Surging Totem is a 24-second totem. It just has a Healing Rain attached to it. The Healing Rain is more effective, and because it's a totem, you can move it with Totemic Projection. The instant cast nature feels amazing. I cannot state that enough. Surging Totem feels fantastic. It is a little bit mana intensive, but it does lean into this AoE healing identity that Totemic kind of has. So in addition to Surging Totem, you have Lively Totems, which if you played a Resto Shaman in Season 3 or Season 4 of Shadowlands, you'll recognize this as the set bonus back then. But basically, whenever you press some totems, they cast Chain Heals for you. And as you can quickly see, Healing Rain, Chain Heal, Totemic is really leaning into AoE healing, and Farseer was really leaning into kind of single target healing focus. So the only caveat here is Totemic has like the one downside, two downsides, I guess. It's a little bit more mana intensive, and it doesn't have as much build flexibility. So you're not going to play a like Riptide build with Totemic. You're just going to play a Chain Heal build with Totemic. Whereas Farseer, you could theoretically play a Chain Heal build with it if they happen to fix the targeting. But yeah, my personal favorite is Totemic. In addition to Lively Totems and Surging Totem, you'll notice when you cast Surging Totem, there's these motes around it. That's just the capstone effect, and you can summon them to give your entire party a really powerful Earth Living effect, or make your next heal cleave on people in Healing Rain. But yeah, my personal favorite is Totemic. I guess let's talk about the talent trees a bit. So the class tree, there's not a ton that we need to talk about, just that it's simply better than what it was in Dragonflight. We have more defensives, so Stone Bulwark Totem is great. You just use it whenever you need a giant shield. But the problem for Resto Shaman and Dragonflight was we just didn't have enough points in our class tree. And they were like, all right, we hear ya. So they cut down a bunch of the mandatory points that we had to take, and moved a couple of things around. So things like Gust of Wind are up here at the top and far easier to talent, which means we no longer have to be Goblin to get around quickly. But yeah, the class tree isn't. We didn't really gain a whole lot of new stuff aside from like Stone Bulwark Totem, but instead it's just a better version of our Dragonflight class tree. The spec tree is where quite a lot changed, and it is balanced exceptionally well right now. So there are only 2 talents, I think, on the tree that I would probably avoid talenting right now, and those are Overflowing Shores. Not a bad talent numerically. It's just you can get better bang for your buck elsewhere. So you're probably not going to see many people run Overflowing Shores, unfortunately. But still feels good. The quality of life is nice. It's just not quite as good as some of the other talents. And then the only other one is Improved Earth Living Weapon. This one is just numerically not very good. It's fine to path through if you are taking Earth Living and you want to get down to like this capstone here. It's fine to do so, but it itself is not a very good talent point. So I think instead of talking about like the 90 different builds that you can play with Resto Shaman, I want to just kind of walk through the sections of the tree and talk about like what are talent swaps that you can make and when should you look to use these different talents. It's probably going to be a little bit easier rather than me talking about 12 different possible talent builds and stuff. I will point out, so the Wowhead guide isn't live yet, but one thing I'm trying to do, because we have so much talent flexibility, is on the talent build, under each of the different talents, I'm going to try and say like, okay, if you're looking for a talent point to move around, your first option here is Earth Living Weapon. So take away Earth Living Weapon, grab something else. I'm going to try and do that for every talent build, so that hopefully, like, if you're doing a dungeon and you need a Curse Dispel and you're like, what the fuck do I drop for a Curse Dispel? Hopefully, these notes will help you out and you don't have to come back and reference this video. So, the top of the section didn't change too much. I'd say this is fairly standard. I'm not going to take Acid Rain by default. This talent build, the one that I'm using right now, this is just for bug testing, so don't copy this. But yeah, most of the talents up here are good. I think the only one that you should probably avoid using is Overflowing Shores, and that's not because it's numerically bad. It's simply just because there are too many other good things to take, so it's hard to take it. Ancestral Vigor's 1 point, probably always taking that. It's really, really good utility. A couple changes in the middle section. So Torrent is better than it was. So if you saw Torrent in the past and were like, why did no one ever take this? This is now a pretty good talent point, especially if you are leaning into like Farseer, for example, because Farseer is pressing a lot more Riptides than otherwise you would. So I think those two go hand in hand quite well. We also have Spouting Spirits, which is a pretty good additional like umph to Spirit Link Totem. So if you need an extra cooldown or you want something to do a little bit more healing, Spouting Spirits is a great option, but by no means necessary. So you can skip it if you really want something else instead. Master of the Elements got redesigned. So this now basically asks you to like weave between Lava Burst and Healing Surge, and those Healing Surges that you cast are going to be really, really beefy. So this in particular, with a Farseer kind of setup in a Mythic Plus setting, feels exceptionally well. The spot healing that it does is really, really good. So good, in fact, that I could actually see a Farseer like Riptide build in a raid setting with Master of the Elements working quite well. Just requires the player to actually like cast those lava bursts and stuff to do so. But still a really good talent. Not something that you're going to play in a chain heal or totemic build, but really like a nice option even in raid if you are playing something like Farseer. The one that a lot of people are probably wondering is, when do you play Cloudburst Totem and when do you play Living Stream Totem? And the answer is unfortunately just down to player skill, but if you hate Cloudburst Totem, play Living Stream. It is really good. The talents are really, really close together right now. The only way that like Cloudburst comes out ahead is if you are really good at using it. I'm not off like I used to only recommend playing Cloudburst Totem, but most of the builds that you'll see are just running a living stream instead. It's because it's good. It's numerically quite close to Cloudburst Totem. It's way easier to play, and in particular, actually feels really, really effective with lively totems. So, if your main focus is Mythic Plus, really, like I urge you to try out Living Stream. It's good. And if you really like using Cloudburst Totem, it is still numerically better, just by a much smaller amount than what you're used to if you played in Shadowlands or in Dragonflight. So, do give it a go though. The last talents here. So, Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem is not the same as what we had in Dragonflight. It is nerfed, or it is nerfed, but this is one that only really works in a like Farseer build. You're not using this like you used to in Dragonflight, so do be aware of that. Oh, there are 3 dead talents. The last one is Tide Turner. You're never taking this talent, but Current Control is a great option. So this basically makes Healing Tide Totem a 2-minute cooldown. So if you need additional cooldown reduction for Healing Tide, then you could swap out a talent point and grab Current Control instead. And like I said, I will try to have a bunch of these notes to tell you what your first and second talent points that you should shift around are. So for example, for Totemic Chain Heal, you can take away Earth Living Weapon and it's fine. And then if you really need to remove something else, you could remove Deluge. And I'm going to try and keep that as updated as I possibly can to help you, move talents around if you need to. But yeah, Current Control, also a great option. Unleashed Life and Undulation are still the same as they have been. But I think that's mostly the middle section done. Oh, one other thing. Flow of the Tides is like good. I'm not recommending it by default because it can be a little annoying, but it actually feels pretty good to use in a totemic build. You can't choose who your Lively Totem's Chain Heals target, but if they randomly do target a Riptide target and you have Flow active, it does work. So sometimes it can feel good. Not something that you like have to run by any means. I think most people are just going to default to Ancestral Reach, but it is an option if you want to do so. The last thing that I think I should probably cover here is when you should use Earth Living Weapon. So Earth Living is a healing upgrade over the weapon runes that we have. So if you care about healing, you should use Earth Living Weapon. The one caveat there is it is not quite as good in a Mythic Plus setting, and especially with how the Earth moat from Totemic works, you're basically applying Earth Living Weapon anyway, like guaranteed, to your entire party if you're playing Totemic in a Mythic Plus build. So you don't need Earth Living Weapon. You can play it if you still want to, but I think for a Mythic Plus setting, you probably will opt to not run Earth Living Weapon, and in a raid setting, it is a good talent point. Also just the first one that you would drop if you need something else. So that's kind of the idea behind Earth Living Weapon. It's numerically a little bit better than what it was, but not by so much so that you have to take it. It is droppable, and it's the first thing that I would take. Like, if I wanted Current Control, then I'm swapping out Earth Living and taking that, for example. That's kind of the talent swaps that you would be doing. Okay. Sorry, this is a little bit long. Almost done. So the bottom of the section of the tree moved around a lot. Ascendance has upgrades now. Both of these upgrades are good. Most people are probably just going to be better off with the 2-minute Ascendance. If there's ever a fight where you can't make use of that cooldown reduction, just take Preeminence. It's really good. It does work with deeply rooted elements, so that is something to keep in mind. You get the haste effect from Preeminence. You don't get the increased duration. But in particular, one thing that I'm like really looking at is playing Oversurge with a Totemic build with Preeminence and deeply rooted elements could be really, really good. Primal Tide Core is the same as it has been. but it just moved up here, so it's a little bit easier to grab. Tidewaters is our Season 2 two-piece bonus, I want to say, from Dragonflight, and it's just extra passive healing to Healing Rain. So it gives Healing Rain a little bit of that extra oomph that it felt like it was missing in Dragonflight. Oops, wrong thing. Which is nice, but perfectly skippable if you don't want to play it. And Primordial Wave is the worst of the capstones, by a pretty good margin. If you don't like Primordial Wave, do not play this. It is not very good in its current tuning, but if you have a ton of Riptides out and you're playing like Farseer, for example, and you also really like playing Primordial Wave and are good at doing so, then it is a fine option. I think most people are probably just going to opt to skip this, judging by how much feedback I've seen that people hate it. They really missed the tuning mark on this one. So if they bump this back up to 60% instead of 40%, then that's something that gets a little bit more interesting. But for right now, this is probably the one capstone that feels a little lackluster compared to the other ones. Downpour is really good. If you are unaware, so they redesigned Downpour. My Healing Rain thing is here on G, and when I cast it, it turns into Downpour for 12 seconds for Totemic, for 6 seconds for Farseer, and then you can just press it, and it does the Downpour heal at the targeted Healing Rain location. And Downpour also gives everyone 10% more HP, which is quite good when you combine that with like Ancestral Vigor in a Mythic Plus setting. High Mythic Plus keys, that will be something that is like really useful when you get to those key levels that start to one-shot you, right? But in addition to that, it just does really good healing, and it feels quite good. Sorry. So Downpour is something that you'll probably always take. Tidebringer is now 1 point. High Tide's still there. Earth and Harmony got a little bit of a redesign. It's better than what it was in Dragonflight overall, so feels pretty good to take now. Reactive Warding is okay. It is just a more point efficient option to get down to the capstone than Ancestral Awakening is. And Improved Earth Weapon just sucks. This talent just isn't very good. So instead, I think some people are going to opt to do this, but also fine to do something like this instead. So just depends on what builds you want to play. Most of the talents down here are like okay. The capstones are good. The points in between them are just like you don't really care about Ancestral Awakening or Wave Speaker's Blessing or Undercurrent or Improved Earth. Like these points that I'm not talenting here, they're all kind of whatever, but the capstones themselves are quite good. Anyway, that is a long video. Hopefully you are a little bit more comfortable with the talent builds and stuff that are like possible with Shaman. You have a ton of flexibility in how you want to play them. I will try to do my best to keep everything updated on Wowhead with all the different builds and stuff. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier. And if you have feedback on what you want to see in these like talent swaps or these like notes, please let me know. I'm always down to change things on the Wowhead guide to make things a little bit easier. I am maining Resto Shaman Season 1, so I will put a little bit more effort into the guide naturally, as I don't have to split my time looking at other things. But yeah, hopefully you do decide to play Resto Shaman, and hopefully you enjoy it. If you have questions or anything, let me know. Usually, I try to be available anyway. But I think that's all I wanted to cover, so I will catch you guys later. I will probably be streaming a good amount early on, so if you have like questions, new to this spec or whatever, feel free to drop by, ask questions. I will try to do my best to answer them. A couple of people I do want to shout out their talent or their pages rather, which I will link to them down below. But Shamrocked, I think it's only Sham. Yeah, this guy has been doing a bunch of content, primarily Mythic Plus focused, but doing a lot of like beta keys and stuff. And is a one-trick Resto Shaman. And then Laren, who many of you probably know, but is like the rank 1 Resto Shaman from Mythic Plus, is also raiding again, I think. So I'll link their stuff down below. If you are more Mythic Plus focused, you should go check them out. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I need to go take a nap. I will catch you guys later. Peace.